It's time for Southern Fried Baseball, presented by College Baseball Central. Hosted by Jake McKeever as he talks everything SEC baseball and more.
Welcome in, College Baseball Central fans. Week 2 is behind us. Really excited to kind of talk through some stuff. Still a little bit of unknowns with some of these teams. Still kind of figuring some things out. There's a few things I feel good about, a few things I feel bad about. Let's go ahead and jump into it. We'll start at the top, kind of with the team of the weekend, if you will. Alabama goes 3-0 in the Jacksonville Classic down there, hosted by Peak. They beat Coastal Carolina 3-0. They beat NC State 4-0. And then on Sunday, Ohio State has the comeback of the year, I would say, as they were down 10-0. Justin LeBron hits 2 home runs. Will Hodo walks it off the construction site. A really, really great weekend for the Alabama Crimson Tide. It started on Friday night with Zane Adams. He worked into the 5th, really did a great job defending against a great, great Coastal offense. From an offensive standpoint for Alabama, it was a really weird game as they only had 3 hits but scored 9 runs. 12 walks for Coastal Carolina, and all in all, it was not a very good game for them. Saturday night, Riley Quick in his first outing against true competition in almost a year, because if you remember last year, he missed all of it with Tommy John. 4 innings, 1 hit, 43 pitches, still kind of working him back, but he was really effective against a very potent and talented NC State lineup. And then again on Sunday, the bullpen goes and absolutely shoves down the stretch. They have 5 innings of scoreless ball, only 1 hit. LeBron gets a home run, gets them kind of in the territory. LeBron hits another home run, breaks out. Alabama looks like they are a legitimate threat in the SEC this year. They did lose 6 people from last year, so everybody had kind of written them off a little bit. Rob Vaughn attacked the portal. Rob Vaughn got some guys back, some seniors that really accepted new roles, and then LeBron is continuing to kind of rise into the occasion. I think that this kind of put everybody on blast and notice down in the SEC. Obviously, it's going to be a grind and stuff like that, and there's really 15 quality teams in the SEC, with Ole Miss kind of doing good last week. But just a great, great weekend from Alabama all around. They're going to be an absolutely tough team to kind of face here in some of these weekend series, as they have a great 1-2 punch in Zane Adams and Riley Quick. It's going to be a dangerous thing going forward. They get 2 weeks to kind of rest up against some inferior competition before heading down to College Station. I'm very, very excited to kind of see where Alabama goes going forward. I would give this an A+ weekend for this Alabama team. Absolutely incredible. There's really nothing better that you can do. Moving on to a team that I thought was going to get an F at the start of the weekend, really kind of clean stuff up down the stretch. They go 2-1, the Arkansas Razorbacks. They win against Kansas State in a game where it was just the Lower Boys that had home runs. They have a gritty, close win against TCU on Saturday. And then Michigan, they didn't get a letdown. They kind of took care of business. Aloy had a great weekend again. The other Aloy had another great weekend too again. Nolan Souza is another guy that is really kind of waiting to break out. If you saw something at a lot of the spring practices, he was hitting really, really good. Unfortunately, when that calendar kind of turned over and the game started to matter, he hasn't really had it. Dave Van Horn has a ton of trust in him, as we've seen. Isn't really hitting the ball very well. But again, Arkansas is going to have to figure some stuff out from a hitting standpoint, because they haven't really faced a ton of world beaters. They did get TCU's ace, as I think they'll kind of move him up into the ace role and really kind of struggle against him. The biggest thing, too, about Arkansas that really scares me, and this will probably be the only time I do this, Washington hasn't won a game, and they gave Arkansas fits on Friday night. Again, it was opening night. Again, there was a lot of things that Arkansas could have done better, and yes, they did win. You'll never complain about winning. But Arkansas has some legitimate bat issues. They have one of the best staffs, even though Gage Wood, we don't know how long he's going to be out for. They can slide in Beetle Cheese, who I think is, in my opinion, a better guy on Sunday, but it's really kind of picking and choosing with him and Gage Wood. So they have a ton of depth in that pitching rotation. But again, Arkansas is going to have to figure out home runs. And it starts with guys outside of Aloy taking better at bats. It starts with Logan Maxwell. It starts with Nolan Souza, like I said. Brett Irondale's really kind of been boom bust. I would say he could kind of be a little bit better for him too as well. Ryder Helfrich's another guy that they just don't have a ton of pop early. And I thought that they were going to have a lot more pop than they actually have. They kind of banged the ball around the yard against Michigan, and TCU kind of they did. But again, I don't know how I feel about this Arkansas team going forward. They have high expectations. I think that in an SEC weekend, they're going to be tough. but I don't know how they're going to hit in a regional. They can't win a shootout. It feels like if you get 5 rounds in Arkansas, you can almost go ahead and fold the tent. Game's over. I give this weekend a C plus B minus area, kind of in that 79-80 range if you were taking a test. They lost to the worst team, even though Kansas State did go 3-0 and quote unquote won the tournament. This isn't the Kansas State team last year. Arkansas should have taken care of business and really dominated this series, really kind of flexed. And yes, they went 2-1, but I felt disappointing with the Arkansas Razorbacks this weekend. So 80 B minus C plus for them. Moving on to the Auburn Tigers, they're a team that went 3-0 against a Wright State team that a lot of people were kind of high on. I didn't really see it. They're still kind of in the Horizon League. Definitely one of the weaker mid-majors that Auburn's going to do. And they absolutely dominated. They had kind of a quote-unquote disappointing weekend last year. They had the walk-off in the midweek. So it's been kind of a weird year for Auburn baseball. But this weekend they absolutely showed out. Sam Dutton on Friday night was absolutely tremendous for Auburn. Then Saturday they go with that TVA role. They go with Alex Petrovich. He pitched really good. It was kind of a bullpen game for them as he only went 3 1/3 innings. I mean, if you can get bullpen games where you only allow 1 run, you're going to feel really, really good about that going forward. And then that freshman Cade down the stretch, he was really good. Bob Terrell is another freshman that had just a monster weekend for them. SEC Freshman of the Week for him as he had his first home run, had a few doubles, looked really, really good, I would say, for him. And again, Ike Irish, I mentioned it on the preview show with Caleb. You can't keep this guy down for long. He's one of the best hitters in the SEC. Absolutely broke out on Saturday, had a multi-hit game. This is kind of what we expect from Mike Irish. I think that he's going to kind of use this going forward. I would give this one an A minus for Auburn. And the only thing that kept it from an A plus for me is it's Wright State. You're supposed to go out and beat Wright State. You're supposed to take care of business. Yes, they won 11-0, 11-1. But again, you're supposed to. Moving on to another team that absolutely dominated. Florida goes 3-0 against Dayton. 13-1, 11-1, and then 12-2. The Florida pitching rotation has just been tremendous. It's everything we thought Arkansas was going to be. Jake Clement goes 4 innings, 1 hit, and gets moved to the Sunday role in forms of Pierce Coppola. They have, I think, the best pitcher going on a Friday night. They are just absolutely tremendous, and the lineup's absolutely shoved. Again, it is Air Force, it is Dayton, so take it with a little bit of a grain of salt. But they've scored over 5 runs in every single game. They've run-ruled now their last 4 opponents in double digits there. They have looked really, really good. Brody Donay, he did sit out on Sunday, but he did pinch hit late. He's absolutely impressed me too as well. He had a monster weekend too, and it always felt like it's 1 step forward, 2 steps back for them. Seeing him kind of have base hits really kind of gave me some great, great stuff going forward. And I'm really excited to kind of see what Brody Donay goes forward. Bobby Bozer is another name to continue to track as he's kind of had a good one. And then Colby Shelton, he had kind of a quiet weekend last weekend, absolutely breaks out, hits his first home run of the season. I am really, really, really impressed with this Florida team. And for as high as everybody has been on Georgia, that's how high I've been on Florida. I think that they have every right to be kind of in that one tier with Tennessee, LSU. We'll talk about Texas A&M here in a little bit. I kind of moved them out of that tier 1. But it's been a fun 2 weeks for Florida. Gets a little bit tougher this week against Miami. This is a new look Miami team. Miami gave them fits last year, if you will. So really, really exciting stuff for them. I would give them that A minus again, like I just gave it to Auburn. They were supposed to take care of business against an inferior opponent. And I came away thoroughly impressed with the pitching that they ran out there. Every single Florida starter feels like must-see TV. I did have a poll where someone asked, how would you rank kind of the pitching staffs in the SEC? I would say Arkansas is 1, Florida is 2, Alabama is 3, Texas A&M's 4. We'll talk about them in a little bit. But it's been a great, great start to the season for Florida. And it felt like it's been a while since they've actually kind of started as strong as they have. Feels like they always kind of wade in the water a little bit, really peaked during SEC play. It feels like this team's a cohesive unit and a strong unit, and I think that they're going to do damage in the SEC. And if the season were to start right now in the SEC, I would have Florida as my number 1 team in the SEC. That's how good I think that they are. I think that the sky is the limit for this team. I am very, very excited to see what Florida does. Moving on to another team that went undefeated, the Georgia Bulldogs played a 4-game home opener against the University of Illinois Chicago. They won 9-3, 15-1, 4-1, and then 17-3 on Sunday. They did doubleheader Friday. It really is kind of hard to win 2 doubleheaders, and maybe it's harder to win them when they have kind of, those weird where we blow you out. Rylan Zimbrowski has just continued to just dominate the zone, get hits at all next to the field. Ryan Black is probably my favorite player from this Georgia team going forward. Super emotional guy, has been just on fire, hitting it right around that 500 mark. He's put on the dog mask a few times. Another guy that's put on that dog mask is Henry Hunter. He absolutely cleared the scoreboard at Foley Field on Friday night and had a monster weekend. I'm going to be honest. This is what I expected from this Georgia team. They kind of had a disappointing one last week against UNC Wilmington. That this offense is just absolutely incredible. They can bang the ball all around the yard. They can single you to death. They can double you to death. They have a bunch of guys that can hit home runs. This is a really dynamic Georgia offense, and there's so many different ways that you can kind of play them. There's so many different guys that can play a variety of different positions. Colby Branch, Trey Phelps, just so many great big name guys. And there really doesn't seem to be, a short part of the lineup for Georgia. That was the one thing is, Georgia doesn't really have a bottom of the lineup. They just have guys that hit near the bottom. And it's been an incredible weekend for Georgia. They're another one that gets that A- because they're supposed to take care of business against UIC. But again, that offense is kind of coming together. I'm excited to see what this Georgia offense does down the stretch. Moving on to a team that was the biggest unknown at the weekend for me because they only played 2 games in a doubleheader last week. Kentucky Wildcats go 3-0 against Belmont. Again, it's Belmont. Belmont hasn't won a game. Game 1, they win 2-1. Game 2, they go 12-0. And then game 3, they go 9-5. They dominated one of the games. They won close. They won it in a variety of different ways. The bats are going to heat up. It's definitely been cold where they have. Again, they haven't had the timing and stuff like that. So the bats are definitely going to get a little bit better. But one guy who's not started slow for them is Cole Haig. He's been just in fuego. He's been almost their entire offense. It seems like he's hitting right around 500. Tyler Bell's hitting in that 280 mark. I think if he can kind of continue that going forward, Kentucky will feel really good about him. 280, 270 is kind of where I saw him. Obviously, there's a few guys that I think are kind of waiting to break out. Rafe Pelletier, Devin Burks are kind of still in that battle where they're both playing, both leaders. Neither of them are really hitting the ball very well right now. No one's really kind of stepped it up and taken that catcher role. I think that's very much still an open competition, and really look for one of them to kind of step up, take that role, start being a hitter that they know that they can be, especially Burks. But that's the one thing to really kind of track with Kentucky is what they do with those two guys, because they're really big clubhouse guys. They're old guys. They've been around the way, but one of them is going to have to step up. Lastly, before we move on to LSU, which I'm sure we'll talk about for a while, Nick McCray has yet to allow a run in 2 starts as he's thrown 11 innings, just a 0.0 ERA. Anytime you get a 0.09 ERA or 0.0 ERA above 9 innings, it starts to be incredible. That's going to be something to kind of track going forward is how long he can kind of do that streak. Overall, B-plus weekend for Kentucky. You would have liked to have seen them dominate these games a little bit more than they did because Belmont's going to be one of the weaker opponents that they play. If more of the games would have gone like game 2 or even game 3, I think it would have been better. Game 1 was a cold, rainy day, so they get a little bit of a pass there. Moving on to LSU, who is playing right this second. Alex will touch on it a little more at Tiger Talk that's going to be coming out tomorrow. So if you haven't had a chance to see that, please give that a look. They played the University of Omaha. Game 2, they came out about as flat could be. Omaha took a combined no-hitter into the 8th. In the 7th inning, Omaha scored on a hit by pitch, runner after moving him over, and then on a pass ball, then a 3-run homer by Jackson Trott off of Connor Bench. You can't go undefeated. Teams lose games all the time. But LSU, I would have liked to have seen them kind of flex a little bit more. There's a few guys that are still kind of in the mix for that outfield role. There's a few guys still in the mix for those arms. So you would have liked to have seen them kind of dominate a little bit more so some of those younger guys could play. But again, Jay Johnson's going to take going 2-1 for them. I don't think that game 2 is any cause for concern at all. The one thing that does kind of scare me about LSU, and I mentioned on the show last week, that they don't really hit the long ball. And I feel like that's kind of what the one thing that you need to do in the SEC to be successful. They're a more dynamic group. Like think of like a Derek Coryell where he's fast, can hit for doubles. He's going to steal bases. He's going to steal balls up the middle. That's kind of what their prototypical one is. But again, Chris Stanfield's been really good for him. Michael Braswell has been but I mean, you kind of know what you're going to get with him. Seems like when he plays really good competition, that's kind of where he shows out. So I'm really kind of excited to see LSU as the competition gets really, really a step up in Frisco. Sam Houston hasn't really looked that good, but Nebraska will be a good litmus test for them. So I'm really excited to kind of see what they do against a talented Nebraska squad. They really kind of took it on the chin against LSU's little brother, Louisiana Lafayette, or UL as they like to be referred to. But incredible, incredible stuff. I give this weekend a B- for LSU, maybe even a C+. I expected a little bit more from them. The pitching was kind of great for them at times, but again, the hitting just absolutely disappeared in game 2. But in game 3, they really kind of rebounded and came back. So that's kind of the weekend that I give them. Moving on to Mississippi State, they went 3-0 against a really underrated Missouri State team. 3-1 on Saturday as Pico Kahn had another absolutely masterful pitching performance for him. We've kind of come to expect this from the senior, and we really need to take a step back and appreciate the greatness that Pico Kahn has. This isn't very common, and especially not for Mississippi State the last few years. He's absolutely shoved for them. I'm really excited. Every time I see Mississippi State and he's pitching, I get really excited because he pounds the zone. He's a crafty lefty, just an old school throwback college arm. He's not really somebody that really pounds the zone, cranks it up to 100, 95, 98. He really does a good job spotting his pitches. He sets himself up. If he can get 3 or 4 pitches working for him, he's an effective pitcher. Saturday, they won 9-3. The bullpen kind of was a little bit down, but Carson Ligon has been absolutely nails for them down the stretch. I really like what I've seen from him. Pico Kahn and Carson Ligon, they're kind of up there with Riley Quick and Zane Adams in terms of 1-2 punches. And if State can get dynamic outings out of their Sunday guy, I think that's kind of their biggest weakness right now. Estose Timon didn't pitch this weekend. And the guy that they ended up throwing out there, I won't mention his name, he didn't really pitch that well for him. So I think Stone Simon's going to get another chance to kind of go in, win that job for them. If they can get a Sunday guy, this becomes a Fringe 1, Fringe 2 tournament team to a super regional host. If they can get a Sunday elite outing, because another lineup's going to hit. Obviously, Ace Reese hasn't had the kind of start that he had envisioned. Ross Heifeld's another guy who's kind of starting slow for them. Those two are going to break out, I think, in a little bit. Aaron Downs and Bryson Chance, 2 guys that I know a lot of State people really weren't too high on coming into the season. I guess they read kind of the negative press around them. They've been absolutely monsters going forward. They've really carried this offense. Both of them are hitting around 500. I give this weekend an A+ for Mississippi State. I know that feels weird to say because Missouri State is a mid-major. They dominated it. I never had any issues with them. They're taking care of business. They had a nice bounce back after that Southern Miss kind of let down for them. Really, really exciting stuff for them. And I just can't wait to see where Mississippi State goes from here because I get to see them this weekend in that Astros College Classic. I cannot wait for Mississippi State to see them. We'll talk more about that on the preview show, but Mississippi State gets an A from me this weekend. Moving on to probably the most disappointing tournament and the most disappointing team this weekend. The Missouri Tigers go 2-1 in the HBCU Classic. They go 6-5 win against FAMU, a 10-2 loss against Alabama State, and a 15-3 win against Southern. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. This was an awful weekend for Missouri. This was a weekend that they should have gone 3-0. How they played on Sunday against Southern is, I think, how they should have done it. The pitching has been, I think, a huge letdown for me. Kirk Jackson's a pitching guy. That's how they won a lot of games last year, was getting in these low-scoring games. And early on, from a starting pitching standpoint, that hasn't been the case. Ian Lose hasn't been as good as we know he can be. He's somebody that really needs to step it up and kind of answer the bell a little bit, get off the mat, because I don't see Missouri scoring 15 runs in the SEC. I don't see them scoring 10. I see them scoring 7 to 8 on a good night. The lineup really leaves something to be desired. They do a lot of dynamic things. They run the bases really well. They bunt guys over. They're an athletic team, but you got to get guys on base for that to happen. And they don't do a good job getting on base. Mateo Cerna's been a nice little surprise for them behind the plate and playing at first. But other than that, it really hasn't been impressive for me at all for this Missouri team. I give them a D. This should have been a get-right series for Missouri, and instead, I'm walking away wondering which SEC team they're going to upset that's going to kill the season. That's how bad I think this Missouri team has been. On that note, moving on to the team that won the weekend, my number one team in the power rankings, the Oklahoma Sooners. They went 3-0 on the weekend. I got to see them in person. Friday was a cold, wet, rainy day. They'd kind of been waiting around for a lot. Kyson Witherspoon was just incredible. 7 innings, 3 hits, 1 earned run. Gave up a leadoff home run and then retired 13 straight. Dylan Crooks slammed the door for him down the stretch. Pitched on Sunday again. 1 1/3, 2 hits, 1 K. Kyle Branch. It was kind of the coming out party for him as he was the MVP. Scored runs on a bases loaded balk to give them the lead. Really kind of a good team win for them. Minnesota was a lot better than people gave them credit for as they blew out Oregon State on Sunday. Saturday, they play said Oregon State team, come from behind, have a monster 4-run inning, had a few home runs, had a one from Easton Carmichael and Sam Mudler. They looked really, really good. Skip Johnson had a quote that said, at a certain point, we stopped pressing and just started competing. I think that's the best way to kind of sum up this team. They looked really loose. They're locked in as a team. They are cohesive unit. They really won the weekend for me. Malachi Witherspoon was good, but only went into the 5th as Oregon State did a really good job kind of, making him force his pitches. But I will say this, the approach that Oklahoma had down the stretch against the Oregon State starting pitcher was great. Mitch Callahan mentioned it in the press game that he didn't feel like his pitcher finished pitches, that he kind of danced around when he got to 2 strikes. I think you have to give more credit to Oklahoma in that situation. Yes, he probably thought a starter could have done a little bit better, but Oklahoma did a great job forcing him to make pitches in the zone. They were poking balls. They were running. Chaos was definitely out in effect. They did a weird 1st and 3rd play. It's been really good to see how he does going forward. Moving on to the Sunday game, which was a real 50-50 game for them. They play Virginia, who went 1-2 on the weekend. They win on a walk-off bunt error, but the bullpen was really, really great. Cam Johnson, he kind of got jumped on a little bit, and the bullpen went out and absolutely shoved. 8 great innings of 1-run ball. They chipped away in the middle innings. They picked off a lot of guys. Dayton Taki, who didn't start in that game on Sunday, had a big pitch hit due to matchups. And then obviously they play a little chaos on they get Dason Harris in there to get a bunt down. He beats it out. They get Willis to lay a bunt down, the 9-hole hitter, and ball gets thrown away and they walk it off. And Oklahoma looked really, really good this weekend. I think that they put the SEC on notice. They're going to win a ton of games with Kyson Witherspoon and Malachi Witherspoon. And they have, I think, one of the better Sunday guys in the entire SEC. They're a dynamic group. They remind me a little bit of that Kentucky team from last year. I don't think the SEC teams have seen the brand of ball that Oklahoma plays. So I think that it's going to take a little bit of getting used to. And it really wouldn't surprise me to see Oklahoma kind of move into that tier 2. Moving on to probably the easiest weekend series of the weekend. Ole Miss goes 3-0 against an Eastern Kentucky team that is winless. They're another one where they got 3 great starting pitching matchups. Hunter Elliott just absolutely shoved again. 6 innings, 3 hits, 10 Ks. Proved that last week wasn't a fluke. Didn't walk a single guy, which I think is big for him. He's attacking hitters. And anytime you have a crafty lefty that attacks hitters, you're going to win a ton of games. And that's what we saw with Ole Miss with Hunter Elliott. He's quietly working his way into the SEC Pitcher of the Year candidate. He's a really underrated Friday guy that I don't think enough people are talking about. There's just so many great Friday night guys, but he has every reason to be in there. Riley Maddox was in a bounce back start, really great for them too as well. 5 innings, 3 hits, no runs, 5 Ks. It was really big for me when he worked into that 5th inning and got through it, because last week at Texas, that's kind of where they started to jump on him, is when he got second time to the lineup. For him to kind of make adjustments, flesh that out, I think is great. Mason Nichols on Sunday pitched only 4 innings for them, but the bullpen kind of gave him a big boost. I really like what Luke Hill in this offense for Ole Miss does. It's a really effective group, but obviously the starting pitching is going to be the one that carries them. I give Ole Miss a on the weekend. There's nothing really that they could have done. They went out and handled business. Their pitchers absolutely shoved. Nothing that we can do for Ole Miss. They kind of proved themselves last week. Moving on to the South Carolina Gamecocks as we come down the stretch here. They win 3 games against I would say, abysmal Milwaukee team. 5-2 in the cold, 6-3 in the cold. When it warmed up, they win 14-4. The starting pitching for South Carolina has been absolute nightmare fuel in a good way. Matthew Becker, Jake McCoy, and Dylan Eskew have just been strikeout machines. All of them are racking up huge numbers. They're all working their counts. They're attacking hitters, not really dancing around like we've seen in the past with some of these South Carolina pitchers. None of them have the walk bug. They've looked really incredible. The lineup's going to get a little bit better. Ethan Petrie is obviously still doing Ethan Petrie thing as he's sitting right around 500. They are probably the most under the radar team in the entire country. No one seems to talk about them. No one seems to give them the credit that I think that they deserve. The pitching has been a truly underrated one, as I think it is first in the SEC in terms of ERA. They haven't had a bad game yet. Obviously, Clemson comes to town this weekend, so it gets a little bit tough. I'd like to see a little bit more from Talmadge LaCroix, but I think he kind of sees that too in his game. He is moving over to catcher from being in the infield, so that is kind of an adjustment. So he gets a little bit of a pass there. This was an A weekend for South Carolina, if not even 90. Almost feels like 10-2. Same thing on Saturday. Really effective weekend for South Carolina, and I'm excited to kind of see them against Clemson because it's going to be a big litmus test for Clemson and for South Carolina. Probably the first half test for Tennessee as they go to Houston this weekend. They kind of went really easy, super easy, decently hard, and then next weekend's going to be a good challenge. They go 3-0 against a Sanford team that's probably going to be in the NCAA tournament. 5-1, 7-3, 11-1. Liam Doyle on Friday night was absolutely nails, attacking the zone, had a ton of strikeouts that he really racked up. Great outing for him. And then the bullpen to kind of have the faith to go and turn it over. Tennessee's looked like the number 1 team in the country if you take preseason rankings aside. They're the hottest team in the country. They're the best team in the country. They have the longest winning streak in the country. And they're still being disrespected. I have them as the number 2 just because I don't think A&M did enough to kind of unseed them. But Tennessee's definitely looked the part early. Levi Clark and Jay Abernathy, 2 freshmen, are over 500. Cannon Peebles has looked really good for them. And again, they don't even have Alberto Ozuna, so if they can kind of get him, this quickly turns into a fight at the back rack, if not already is. They lead the country in home runs, but again, all their games have been at Lindsey Nelson. I will say this, not a lot of them have been cheap home runs. There never really are cheap home runs at Lindsey Nelson, especially not with Tennessee. But it'll be interesting to see this weekend how they kind of handle that step up with Arizona and Oklahoma State. Really kind of excited to see what they do because I think Arizona is going to look a little bit better than they did the last couple of weeks. Moving on to the number 1 team in the country, Texas A&M goes 2-1 against Cal Poly, 6-1, 4-3, and 3-2. Saturday they had to come back. Gavin Grahovic had the big double. Sunday they blew the lead in the 9th with 3 runs and they couldn't score anything in the bottom half. Obviously, the big story of Texas A&M today is Gavin Grahovic has a torn labrum on his non-throwing shoulder. He is going to be sidelined the entire rest of the year. It's an 8-month injury. Just an absolutely death kill to Texas A&M going forward. They do have a little bit of depth as they can slide Sawyer Farr, who is a natural third baseman who played that at Penn. They can do some things with Jamal George, Sawyer Farr. Terrence Keel can play second when Caden Sorrell comes back. So it's a big loss just because he's the SEC Freshman of the Year, home run king as a freshman for Texas A&M. And honestly, he's looked really good. He's been in a ton of pain as he heard it last summer up at Team USA. Didn't play in the fall at all. He's an absolute warrior for even trying to play through this. But, Texas A&M is going to have to answer something. And it starts with Jace Lavalette and Gavin Cash having better at-bats. They really haven't looked the part at all. And again, I get it's cold, and I get that they're kind of big timing guys that'll break out later. Remember, Jace's freshman year didn't really have that good of a start too as well. Both of them have to be better than they are, and they're going to be the ones that Texas A&M really counts on with Caden Sorrell and Gavin Grahovic sidelined for the foreseeable future. Blake Binderoff's got to be another guy that's better. Mike Bergevin and him had a really good back-and-forth battle in the fall. One of them has to step up and win the job. Bergevin hasn't really gotten a chance to. It really wouldn't surprise me to see him get a chance in the midweeks, as he only has one at bat. That's kind of the catch-22 and A&M misses midweeks. But overall, it was B-, C+, kind of that range for him. The starting pitching was absolutely electric for him. Miles Patton on Sunday went 8 innings, no runs. And he outdueled Ryan Prager, who only allowed 1 run. Justin Lampkin's sandwich between them was not as effective, but again, he's been really good. And all A&M needs from him is to save the bullpen. I think that's where A&M's big issues lie are in the bullpen. With Josh Stewart down, they're really going to have to count on Caden Wilson and Brad Rudis kind of take steps up, and Caden Freshcorn, too, is another guy who can help lead the lead for him on Sunday. The bullpen has to be a lot better. Last year, that was, I think, the calling card of Texas A&M. They had Chris Cortez. They had Evan Aschenbach. And this year, they don't have either of those guys. So they're going to need somebody to kind of wake up, answer the bell. Moving on to probably the most disappointing 3-0 team of the weekend for me. Texas went 3-0 against Dartmouth. Saturday, it was 21 degrees. I will say, for as close as a game as that was, there were several balls that normally would have gotten out that kind of died at the wall. I think it was either Adrian Rodriguez or Jalen Flores that hit a ball like over 100 miles an hour, and it died 15 feet in front of the wall. Jared Spencer struggled a little bit, but again, it was cold, and he was such a good outing in there. Max Ballew's kind of still continuing to break out for them, too, as well. They handled business. They won the game, but again, they're going to need somebody like Jalen Flores has started a little bit slow. Rylan Galvan started a little bit slow for them. There's a few, I don't think they bench either of them, but there's a few freshmen waiting in the wings. Like Cole Chamberlain had a really good spring and fall. She was kind of in the mix for that DH role pre-Max Ballew, illness thing that forced him into the DH role. Obviously, Tommy Farmer's been tremendous for them. It's been a weird year for Texas. Casey Borba's kind of still finding his way in. They are one of the best teams in the country in terms of quality wins, but they need to do a little bit more, I think, from an offensive standpoint, and that's just going to come with timing. Adrian Rodriguez, obviously, is a freshman. He's going to eventually have that kind of freshman slump. Jalen Flores, he's too good of a hitter to take the at-bats that he's had so far. Dylan Valentis, who they're kind of working into that Sunday role, they got him stretched out into the 4 2/3 1 hit. He was not the Sunday guy last week, but it was always kind of expected that he was going to be in there. He's, I think, going to be an elite guy in a Sunday role. And then Ethan Mendoza coming over from Arizona State, Dallas kid. It's exciting to kind of see the smile on his face when he plays at the dish. He said that he grew up wanting to go to Texas, actually snubbed Schloss when he was at A&M because he said he didn't really feel like an A&M guy. He gets his chance to play for Schloss at the UT. And it's been a really, really good experiment with him going forward. He won the job with Borba outright. Obviously, Texas is still working through some stuff from a lineup standpoint. They're going to be fine. I think their real test is once SEC play start because we kind of saw what they can do against quality teams. Lastly, Vanderbilt goes 3-0 against St. Mary's. It was the coming out party of RJ Austin, 5 of 9 with 3 RBIs, 5 runs, 2 bases on balls, being a menace on the base paths in a good way. He's somebody that I really, really like going forward. He was kind of in that Golden Spikes conversation early before tailing off. But, it was just the hit parade for Vanderbilt. And that's kind of what we come to expect from them the last couple of years is they're not going to hit a bunch of home runs. 12 hits, 13 hits, 9 hits. They had a 7th run, 6th in the game 3. 6 guys had a hit and 6 with an RBI. The pitching has been really, really good for them. Ethan Mackel, actually, just Cody Bowker and the bullpen have been really good for them. Bowker went 5 innings on Sunday, 6 Ks, 3 walks. J.D. Thompson and Evan McElvain, I think they've started a little bit slow. They're still working through some stuff. Kind of had a little bit of the walk bug. J.D. Thompson got hit around a bit. But really a good weekend overall because Vanderbilt has kind of the hitting talent that they haven't had in years past to kind of mask some of these pitching performances. So overall, I give Vanderbilt a B+. I think that's all we have for our preview show. Thanks, everybody who tuned in. We'll be back Wednesday with my buddy Andrew, and we'll be breaking down all the SEC series. Thanks again, and see everybody Wednesday.